Welcome to Financial Revelations. I am David Sopransky, your host. Today, I'm wearing one of my newer sport jackets. It does have my name written in it, just in case I get lost. They'll be able to send me home at least. Today, we're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and a little bit about inflation, give you a prediction about what's going to happen. But if you want to contact us, you could email Joshua at epsf.com with questions, comments, or anything like that. You could follow us on Twitter at SkiBucks1 on Twitter. I like Twitter because they do break a lot of news there. There's a lot of the biggest news sources will release news there first. And a lot of it qualifies as a release of information for the SEC, so that it's if a CEO or a company has some type of public information they need to get out, they could release it there. And then on Thursday mornings, I'm on WCRF in Cleveland, 103.3 from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And you can get Moody Radio's app. Just you can download it on any device, really, and you can listen wherever you're at. So we have people listening in Alaska, people listening in Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, all over the world. So it's a great thing. We take questions. It's a little bit more politically neutral on Thursday mornings because they like it that way. But I'm not really politically neutral, and politics do affect what we do in the finance world and your finances in general. So we can't really be neutral. So inflation, the inflation report came out, and the month-over-month numbers. So from last month to this month, inflation did not rise anymore. So it stayed flat. Now, the administration just came out and said there's 0% inflation. That is not true. It's at 8.8%. It's the highest it's been since the 80s. It's not good. It is really not good. And some of the most pernicious aspects of the inflation report actually did go up. So when you look at food and energy, energy has dropped over the last 50 or so days. I don't think that's going to be a long-term trend. I think energy prices are probably going to go back up. The price of eggs year over year is up 38%. Those are big numbers. Rent did go up month over month. That is not stopping. And when you think about the fact that the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, so mortgage costs have been going up, pricing a lot of people out of the mortgage market, now they're left with having to go back and pay rent, which is also going up. So they're kind of getting priced out on every side. Now, what happens is people tend to make long-term decisions based on inflation. And so there's a psychology to it. And that's what the Fed is really trying to get in the way of. They're trying to get in the way of the psychology of inflation that we see. We have seen this before. We saw it especially in the late 70s, early 80s. Inflation was so bad. Just the psychology of the consumer changed dramatically, very quickly. And it takes a long time to turn it back around because people do not trust that it's going to not come back. So you kind of get a hold of inflation. People are still holding onto their money, playing it very close to the vest because they're thinking, well, what if gas goes back up again? I'm going to need to be prepared for that. So they tend to circle the wagons, so to speak, and what happens then is they stop spending money. And now you have a problem on top of a problem. So it's probably helpful to go over just a little bit about what inflation really is. And at its heart, inflation is a very simple concept. It's too much money chasing too few goods. So think about it this way. When COVID hit, we couldn't get microchips, still can't really get them in the way we had in the past. Cars take hundreds of thousands and thousands of microchips now. Just your brake lights take 8 microchips. So just the turn on and off, to some cars, the brightness on your brake lights will increase the harder you press the brakes. That's a microchip. So there's a lot of things going on there. Well, and we had a lot of money. We had COVID money. People had worked from home, so they didn't have to spend money on things like getting to and from work clothes. And so we were kind of flush with cash. We got all this money, couldn't find a car. So what happened to prices? They went up. They went way up, especially on used cars. And if you purchased a used car in the last couple of years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Starting to come down a little bit, but it's coming down from really elevated prices. So when the administration says, fuel prices are down, yeah, that's true, but they're up $2 from when they started. So that's not a real consolation to me. Get it back to where it was when you took over, and then we can talk. When the administration says, well, we've created all these jobs, not really. People are going back to work to the jobs they already had. When we get to that number, now you're creating jobs. So the data is a little misleading right now. And, if I were in the administration, I'd be doing the same thing. You got to talk about something, so it might as well be something that you could spin good. So one of the things that's going to happen is the House is probably going to vote and most likely pass the Inflation Reduction Act. It might be Friday, a couple of days. It might be next Monday. They're not in a big hurry because they have the votes. So, but it's going to happen this month. Now, you could name this act anything. You could name it the Nothing to Do with Lowering Inflation Act, because the Wall Street Journal came out and said it's not even going to really affect inflation until 2025. So what's going to happen is, this is my opinion, is that this act, think about it this way. A train leaves Chicago at 5 o'clock. Now, this is a math problem I could never figure out, and it's probably why I'm in economics and not teaching math someplace. Train leaves Chicago, train leaves Cleveland. They're on the same track. They're headed towards each other. There's no turnoffs. At some point, they're going to hit each other. And I think pretty much the Inflation Reduction Act, which doesn't reduce inflation, that's what it does. Because in 2021, the administration got a pass from the Fed. The Fed did not raise rates in 2021 because the administration was doing another stimulus bill and throwing money at us, writing checks to us and lengthening out unemployment. You didn't have to pay your rent back, or you didn't have to pay your rent, you didn't have to pay your mortgage. So they're basically putting money into the economy. And the Fed, when they raise rates, takes money out of the economy. So when the Fed gave the administration a pass in 2021, it cost the Fed dearly. It cost them a lot of credibility. They don't like that. They like to be ahead of these things. And I don't think the administration's going to get a pass this time. So one of the things that the Inflation Reduction Act does is it front loads a lot of the spending to right now. So essentially you're taking 10 years worth of money and spending it in the first 2-3 years. That's inflationary. So what the Fed's trying to do is take money out of the system. And what the administration's doing is they're putting money into the system. So they're battling each other. The Fed isn't going to lose this battle. When you have inflation, there's really two ways, especially the inflation that we have right now. So fuel inflation, for instance, what did we do? The administration immediately, well, not immediately, after some pressure, they went to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and they released a lot of oil. The Trump administration had fully filled the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. First time in a long time. Oil prices were low. It made a lot of sense. It was a good idea. So oil prices skyrocket. What did? They increased supply by releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The reason why the price drop is temporary because they haven't done anything structurally to increase oil supply. In fact, they're doing things to lower it long term. So that's one of the things that you could do to fight inflation is to increase supply. Well, supply chains are still constrained around the world. Even here, they're constrained. COVID is, China's still locking down cities all over the place. I just saw a report on what you have to do if you go outside in Shanghai. It's pretty dramatic. We probably, I'd say we wouldn't put up with it here, but we did for 2 years. So we probably would now. The COVID experience did teach me that at the first hint of totalitarianism, you have to fight it. You cannot let them get a foothold in, because these bureaucrats, they're probably the people that got their lunch money stolen on the playground every day. They love a little bit of power. They don't just want a little bit, they want it all. So the other way to lower inflation, if you're not going to increase supply, which we're having a hard time doing, is you decrease demand. And that's really what the Fed does, is they have the power to either increase demand or lower demand. And the way they do that is via the cost of money. So if you wanted to decrease the demand for housing, you make buying a house expensive. And how do you do that? You raise rates. That's what the Fed is trying to do. They're trying to decrease the demand for housing. They're trying to increase unemployment a little bit. I know that sounds weird. Well, why wouldn't you want everybody working? Well, we do want everybody working. But what tends to happen when there's not a big labor pool to choose from is wages skyrocket, because now employers are kind of in competition now. They're fighting each other for employees. So what do you do to get an employee? You say, look, hey, that guy's paying you this. I'm going to pay you this. And I'll give you remote work, and so we're in competition. So that increases wages. So we're trying to get unemployment up a little bit. The Fed is not going to lose this battle. And if at any point they channel their inner Paul Volcker, who drove us into a deep recession in the 80s just to cool down the economy, we could be in trouble. So here's what I think is going to happen. We are going to have a real recession 2023, probably last into 2024. It's too early to tell if it's going to be a deep recession. The Fed isn't really good at soft landings. They haven't gotten it right in a long time in that sense. I have no reason to believe this would be different, but it's not going to be 2008. I do think stocks are going higher through the end of the year, mainly because oil prices have come down. If you do get moderation in inflation where I think the Fed's going 75 basis points in September, and they're going to raise every meeting through the end of this year and then maybe take a pause. But certainly it's not bad news that inflation moderated this month. I just don't know if it's going to last. And the Fed needs to get in front of that inflation psychology, or things risk getting way worse. And I do believe the administration is going to continue to deny and obfuscate and bend reality around the kind of the directionless economic policy. The only place that they really have direction is on the new Green Deal, and that's killing American energy. It really, what happens when we're not energy independent is the world is a very, very dangerous place, because a lot of people have leverage. And when you run in these high-level diplomatic circles, leverage is everything. What do you have that I want, and how do I get it? Well, if you're an oil producer and we're not producing oil, they want our money, and that's a big deal. When Donald Trump was president, Saudi Arabia was doing so poorly they had to float a bond to pay for their government spending. First time ever. I don't think they're going to have to do that this year. And the new Green Deal is going to the new Green Deal is really part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It is going to cause prices to go up through the end of the year, I think, on energy. My guess is that it'll be leading into the election, the midterms, oil prices will be rising. Now, I want you to remember something. All power is cyclical. And the Democrats are in power now. At some point, the Republicans will be in power. They'll let us down just as equally. Politicians do what politicians do, generally in their interests, not your interests. I used to be for term limits, and then I realized we already have term limits. It's the ballot box. Just vote for somebody else. But the way that Congress Now, you can't gerrymander in the Senate because the whole state votes for senators, so there is no gerrymandering in the Senate. But the way things work in Congress is they have aligned the districts, so they're very safe for that party. So, what I have been watching is a lot of Republicans got primaried and have lost. So there are going to be some new faces in Congress. There's no doubt about that. But things are going to be okay. America is a great country. We always find a way out of things like this. Eventually, the Republicans will be in power, and hopefully they're going to roll back things like the New Green Deal as quickly as the Democrats rolled back America's energy independence. And that was a very quick change that they did. Well, one thing that you got to give them credit for is they campaigned on something, and then they went out and did it. And I would love it if more politicians campaigned on something and then went out and did it. I do think that the effect of what they did was underestimated by the people who voted for them because, I don't know anybody who doesn't pay for gas. I do know some people who drive Teslas, but they got to pay for energy. It isn't charged by unicorn farts. It's charged by electricity. So they're paying too. Everybody's paying. And the idea that New Green Deal is a lot cleaner, it's not a true argument. These rare earth metals that we use to make the New Green Deal stuff, the amount of mining that goes into that to getting them, they're actually the minerals are not rare. They're just in very, very small concentrations. And so you have to mine a tremendous amount of earth to get them. And the chemicals used to extract those rare earth metals are extremely hazardous and harsh. It's something to see. There's a couple of towns in China that I read an expose on where they mine rare earth metals. And they did an interview with somebody there. And I could pull this, if somebody wanted to fact check me on this, give me a call and I'll give you the article. They said, well, about 5 years after they started mining here, people's teeth just started falling out. It's very dirty, very toxic. So climate change is kind of a hoax, to be honest with you. But I am David Safransky. I'm trying to shoot straight, be honest with you guys, tell you how it is. Consider myself a real American, and I am the voice you can trust. We'll be back on Financial Revelations next week. Thank you.